The great station hung in space like a metal moon. Calibers Prime was bigger than most planets. Home to the Galactic Council, where 47 different alien species met to talk about laws and borders and peace. Today, the main chamber buzzed with voices, clicks, and sounds that no human ear had heard before. Representative Kelther stood at the center platform. He was tall and blue, with 4 arms and eyes that glowed faintly in the dim light. He tapped his data pad, and a hologram appeared in the air above him. "Council members, we have discovered a new species," Kelther announced. His voice was calm, almost bored. "They call themselves humans. They come from a system called Sol, from the 3rd planet. They have recently developed basic faster-than-light travel." The hologram showed a small blue and green planet. Then it showed images of humans, their cities, their primitive ships. Some council members leaned forward with mild interest. Most did not bother to look up from their own devices. "Their technology is outdated by approximately 300 cycles," Kelther continued. "They possess no empire, no colonial network, and no advanced weapons. Their biology shows no remarkable features. Standard carbon-based life form. 2 arms, 2 legs, forward-facing eyes. We recommend Category 7 classification with probationary observer status." A few murmurs went through the chamber. Category 7 meant almost nothing. It was the classification given to species that had barely left their home systems. Species that would probably never matter in the grand scheme of galactic politics. "Any objections?" asked the council speaker. An ancient creature that looked like a floating jellyfish made of crystal. Silence filled the chamber. No one objected. No one cared enough to object. Far from the council chamber, in a small docking bay on the outer ring of Calibers Prime, Commander Dayhouse stood looking out a window at the massive station. He was a compact man with sharp eyes and short black hair starting to gray at the temples. Behind him, his crew prepared for their first official meeting with the Galactic Council. "The translation software is working well," said Minji, the chief engineer. She was younger than Dayho, with quick hands that never stopped moving, always adjusting something, fixing something. "But I'm getting some strained readings from the station's power systems." "Strange how?" Dayho asked. "Inefficient. Very inefficient. They're losing about 30% of their energy through poor routing and outdated junction systems." Minji frowned at her tablet. "We solved these problems 50 years ago on Earth. It's like they never optimized their grid." Taiyang, the science officer, looked up from his own work. He was tall and thin, with glasses that made his eyes look bigger than they were. "Maybe they don't need to optimize. When you have unlimited resources, efficiency doesn't matter." "Efficiency always matters," Minji muttered, but she said nothing more. The call came an hour later. Ambassador Haijin returned from the council chamber with news. She was a dignified woman in her 50s, gray hair pulled back, dressed in a simple blue uniform that represented Earth. Her face showed nothing, but Dayho had worked with her long enough to see the tension in her shoulders. "Well?" he asked. "We have observer status," Haijin said. "We can attend council sessions, but cannot vote. They've assigned us a sector in the outer regions, far from the core systems." She paused. They were very polite, very formal, and completely uninterested. "They dismissed us," Taiyang said. "It was not a question. They catalogued us," Haijin corrected. "Like a new species of plant. Interesting for a moment, then filed away and forgotten." Dayho moved to the window again, looking at the vast station, at the hundreds of ships coming and going, at the empire of space that humanity had just stumbled into. Earth had been so excited when they finally cracked faster-than-light travel. They thought they would find wonder and welcome among the stars. Instead, they found bureaucracy and indifference. "What sector did they give us?" Dayho asked. Haijin pulled up a star map on the main display. a small region highlighted in green, far from the bright clusters of core systems. Sector 429. 12 systems, most of them empty. 3 have marginally habitable worlds. No strategic value, no rare resources, no existing claims. They gave us the scraps, Minji said. They gave us a start, Hyjin replied. It's more than some species get. The next day, the human delegation prepared to leave Calibers Prime. As they walked through the station toward their ship, they passed dozens of different species. Some towered over them. Some skittered on 6 legs. Some floated in containment fields. None gave the humans a second glance. Minji kept scanning the station with her engineering eyes, noticing more inefficiencies, more outdated systems, more problems that simple human solutions could fix. But she kept quiet. They were the newcomers here, the insignificant species from nowhere. As their ship undocked and turned toward their new sector, Daeho gathered his crew. They think we don't matter, he said. Maybe they're right. We're one planet, and they're thousands. We have 10 ships, and they have millions. But we're here now. We're part of this galaxy, whether they notice us or not. What do we do, Commander? Taiyang asked. Daeho smiled slightly. We do what humans have always done. We adapt. We learn. We survive. And we build something worth noticing. The ship jumped to faster-than-light speed, leaving Calibers Prime behind. In the Council records, humanity was now officially logged as Species 7 to 449, Category 7 probationary status. A footnote in a database that no one would ever read. The galaxy had barely noticed humanity's arrival. That would turn out to be their first mistake. 3 years had passed since humanity received its small corner of the galaxy. In that time, Earth had sent 17 colony ships to Sector 429. The colonies were modest, nothing like the grand cities the older species had built. Prefabricated habitats, basic mining operations, small farming domes. But they worked, and they grew. Commander Daeho, now promoted to Fleet Coordinator, stood in the observation deck of Unity Station, humanity's first permanent space station outside the Sol system. Through the window, he could see the lights of New Bizon colony on the planet below. Population report came in, said his assistant, a young officer named Kyungmin. New Bizon is at 40,000. New Sol hits 30,000 next month. The agricultural domes are producing surplus already. Daeho raised an eyebrow. The projections had said it would take 5 years to reach surplus. Humans work fast when they're motivated, Kyungmin said with a slight smile. And everyone wants to prove we belong here. Halfway across Sector 429, a human cargo ship called the Clever Merchant docked at a neutral trading post. The post was a ramshackle station where dozens of species met to trade without council oversight or taxes. Here, the rules were simple. Bring goods, make deals, don't start fights. Junho climbed out of his ship and stretched. He was a stocky man with laugh lines around his eyes and a talent for reading people, even when those people had tentacles or scales instead of faces. He had been trading for 2 years now, and business was good. Very good. Junho, my friend. A voice called out. It belonged to Krell, a merchant from the Torvan species. Krell looked like a bipedal lizard with feathers instead of scales. I have that crystal shipment you wanted, and I have your medical supplies, Junho replied. He pulled a datapad from his pocket. But I heard something interesting. Heard the Vossen are looking for rare earth metals. You know anyone who has them? Krell's eyes widened. The Vossen? They never trade with Torvan. We've been enemies for 300 cycles. They don't have to know it came from you, Junho said casually. I can be the middleman. You get the profit, they get the metals, everyone's happy. Krell stared at him. You would do that? Why not? Business is business. What Krell didn't understand, what most aliens didn't understand, was that Junho saw opportunities everywhere. The galaxy was full of species that refused to trade with each other because of old wars, ancient grudges, cultural taboos. They followed rigid rules, stuck to their patterns. Humans didn't have those patterns yet. They were new enough to be flexible, curious enough to learn, and practical enough to see that money didn't care about history. Within 6 months, Junho had made himself useful to a dozen different species. He carried messages between rivals, found buyers for unusual goods, solved problems that others didn't even realize could be solved. He wasn't rich yet, but he was known. And in the trading posts, being known was more valuable than credits. On a human research station orbiting a dead moon, Dr. Soman was making a different kind of discovery. She was a xenobiologist, studying the evolutionary history of spacefaring species. Her lab was small, cluttered with samples and data screens showing genetic charts of 40 different alien species. "This is fascinating," she muttered to herself, comparing genetic sequences. "They're all apex species. Every single one." Her assistant, a recent graduate named Hannah, looked up from her work. "What do you mean?" "Look at this." Soman pulled up a chart. The Vossen, the Krell, the Torvin, even the council leaders. All of them evolved as the dominant predators on their planets. But somewhere in their history, probably during their industrial ages, they eliminated all other large predators. They removed competition. So? Hannah asked. So humans didn't. Soman switched to Earth's evolutionary chart. We lived alongside lions, tigers, bulls. We were predators, yes, but we were also prey. We had to think like both. We had to be creative, adaptive, cooperative. She pulled up more data. Most of these species developed intelligence in isolation, as the only thinking creatures on their worlds. They learned to dominate, to control, to follow patterns that worked. Humans learned to survive in chaos, to read intentions, to change strategies on the fly. Is that why humans are good at trading? Hannah asked. Why Junho and others like him are doing so well? Maybe, Soman said thoughtfully. Pattern recognition. Social flexibility. The ability to think from multiple perspectives. These species had millions of years to optimize one approach. We had millions of years learning that there's never just one approach. She typed up her findings and submitted them to the Galactic Journal of Xenobiology. It was a minor publication, mostly read by researchers and academics. The paper was accepted and published without much fanfare. In the vast ocean of galactic knowledge, it was a single drop. No one on the council read it. No one thought it mattered. Back at Unity Station, Deho received a quarterly report on human expansion. The numbers surprised him. 19 colonies now, not 17. Population growth exceeded projections by 15%. Trade income was triple the estimates. Not a single colony had failed or been abandoned. We're expanding faster than planned, Kyungmin noted. Should we slow down? Deho considered this. Every other species in the galaxy seemed to expand in careful, calculated waves. They planned for decades, built massive infrastructure, moved in overwhelming force. It was efficient but slow. Humans were doing something different. They were spreading like water, finding the cracks and gaps, filling spaces that others overlooked. Small colonies, fast setup, quick adaptation. It wasn't impressive by galactic standards, but it was working. No, Deho decided. Let them grow. We're not competing with anyone. We're just existing. Let's see where it goes. In the trading posts, Junho continued making deals and friends. On the research stations, Soman continued studying why humans were different. In the colonies, families built homes and farms and lives in the stars. The galaxy still barely noticed. In council reports, Human expansion was noted as within expected parameters for a Category 7 species. The analysts saw the numbers but missed the pattern. They were measuring humanity by their own standards, looking for grand fleets and massive projects. They didn't see the network forming. They didn't notice that humans were becoming useful, necessary, integrated. They were looking for an empire and missing the web dot. It would be another year before anyone realized what was actually happening. By then, it would be far too late to stop it. The Viridian Belt was a region of space that everyone needed, but no one owned. It sat at the intersection of 5 major trade routes, a perfect location for ships to refuel, resupply, and transfer cargo. For centuries, it had been neutral ground, protected by Council peacekeeping forces. Then the Krellian Syndicate took it. The Syndicate wasn't a government. They were criminals, smugglers, and pirates who had somehow acquired military-grade technology. They surrounded the Viridian Belt stations with a shield network so advanced that nothing could penetrate it. Ships that tried were disabled and captured. The trade routes choked. Prices across the galaxy began to rise. The Council sent the Vossen Third Fleet to retake the belt. The fleet arrived with 30 warships, weapons charged, ready for battle. They fired their plasma cannons at the shields. The shields absorbed the blasts, analyzed the energy signature, and adapted. Within seconds, the shields were immune to plasma fire. The Vossen switched to kinetic missiles. The shields adapted again. Particle beams, ion cannons, gravitational disruptors, nothing worked. The shields learned and adjusted faster than the Vossen could change tactics. After 6 hours of trying, the Third Fleet retreated, damaged and humiliated. The Council tried again. The Torvin's second battle group attacked from multiple angles simultaneously. The shields adapted to all of them. Another failure. Then, the Krull sent their elite strike force with experimental weapons that shouldn't even exist yet. The shields adapted to those too. 2 years passed. The Viridian Belt remained in Syndicate hands. Trade suffered. The Council argued about what to do next, each species blaming the others for the failures. Ambassador Haijin watched the Council debates from the Human Observer section, a small booth far from the main floor. She had been attending sessions for 5 years now, and she had learned how the Council worked. They were powerful, yes, but they were also rigid. They had procedures for everything, protocols that must be followed, dignified processes that took months. When the Council opened the floor for suggestions about the Viridian Belt crisis, Haijin pressed her request button. It took 20 minutes before the speaker acknowledged her. "The Human Observer wishes to speak," the speaker announced, sounding mildly surprised. Haijin stood. "The Council has tried force 3 times. Perhaps a different approach would work. Humanity would be willing to assist." Silence filled the chamber. Then someone laughed. It was a wet, bubbling sound from a species whose name Haijin couldn't pronounce. "No offense intended," said Kelther, the same representative who had first catalogued humans 5 years ago. "But if our advanced fleets cannot break the shields, what could your limited resources possibly accomplish? Sometimes problems require different thinking, not bigger weapons," Haijin replied calmly. "The offer is noted and declined," the speaker said. "Next item on the agenda." Haijin sat down, unsurprised. But as she was leaving the chamber after the session, a small alien approached her. It was a Torvin representative named Kelvin, with green feathered scales and nervous eyes. "Ambassador Haijin," Kelvin said quietly. "Could we speak privately?" They met in a small conference room. Kelvin looked around nervously before speaking. "My people are desperate," Kelvin said. "The trade disruption is destroying our economy. The Council won't let us try again after our fleet failed. But if humans were to attempt something independently, without official Council approval, you want us to try," Haijin said. "We have nothing to lose. If you fail, no one will be surprised." If you succeed, Kelvin's eyes showed something like hope. Can you really do it? I don't know, Hyjin said honestly. But we can try. 2 weeks later, Commander Daho's ship, the Persistence, approached the Viridian Belt with a crew of 12. The ship was small, barely the size of a Vossen shuttle. Minji was there, older now with more gray in her hair, but still the best engineer humanity had. And there was Yuna, a tactical specialist who had trained with Earth's military before joining the space program. Sensors show the shield network is active, Taiyang reported from the science station. Same configuration that stopped the Council fleets. We're not going to attack it, Daho said. First, we study it. For 3 days, the Persistence orbited the Viridian Belt, watching. They recorded every energy fluctuation, every pattern, every detail. The Syndicate ships inside the shields watched them, but didn't bother attacking. Why would they? The humans had one small ship, .YUN. A spent those 3 days reviewing the data, running it through human-designed analysis programs, looking for patterns. On the 3rd day, she found something. The shields adapt by cycling through defensive frequencies, she explained to the crew. When they detect an energy signature, they shift to a frequency that blocks it. But there's a gap during the shift. 0.3 seconds. Too fast for most species to exploit. Too fast for them, Minji said, understanding. Not for us. Human reaction times were faster than most species in the galaxy. Not by much, just a fraction of a second, but sometimes a fraction was enough. It came from being prey as well as predators, from needing to dodge and react and survive. We can't fire weapons through that gap, Daho said. We're not fast enough to aim and shoot in 0.3 seconds. No, Yuna agreed. But we could pre-position weapons and trigger them during the gap. They spent another day preparing. Minji modified mining drones, simple robots used for asteroid excavation, adding kinetic weapons and precise timers. They would place the drones around the shield perimeter, then trigger them all at once. Time to fire during the shield cycle gap. The Syndicate still didn't interfere. They had seen the galaxy's best fleets fail. They weren't worried about 12 humans in a small ship. The attack lasted 17 seconds. The drones activated simultaneously. Kinetic rounds, simple metal projectiles accelerated to high speed, fired through the shield gaps. The shields tried to adapt but couldn't cycle fast enough. The rounds weren't sophisticated, just chunks of metal, but they didn't need to be. They punched through the shield generators, destroying them one by one. The Syndicate ships inside scrambled to respond, but without the shields, they were outmatched. Council peacekeeping forces, which had been waiting nearby, moved in immediately. The battle was over in minutes. The Viridian Belt was free. The news spread across the galaxy within hours. The Torvum publicly thanked humanity for their assistance. The council held an emergency session. Kelther stood and demanded an explanation. How did they do it? He asked. We sent our best fleets, our most advanced weapons. Ambassador Hyjin stood in the observer booth. We watched instead of attacking. We looked for patterns instead of forcing solutions. And when we found the weakness, we used tools designed for the specific problem, not general-purpose weapons. But the timing, another council member protested. The precision required is within human capabilities, Hyjin finished. You were looking for a powerful solution. We looked for the right solution. The session dissolved into arguments. Some council members praised humanity's success. Others called it luck, a fluke that couldn't be repeated. Many were simply confused about how such a minor species had succeeded where they had failed. On the Persistence, Daho and his crew headed home to Unity Station. They had won, but Daho felt uneasy. They had proven humans could solve problems that stumped the council. That was good, but now the galaxy was starting to notice them. And Deho wasn't sure if that was good at all. The success at Viridian Belt changed things for humanity, though not in the way anyone expected. The Council didn't promote them or give them new privileges. Instead, something quieter happened. People started paying attention. Junho no longer needed to introduce himself at trading posts. When he arrived, merchants waved him over, eager to see what deals he might arrange. His network had grown beyond anything he had planned. He now coordinated trade between 23 different species, many of whom still refused to talk to each other directly. "How do you do it?" asked Ravik, a Krell merchant who had become something like a friend. They sat in a small cafe on Orbital Station 12, a neutral meeting ground. "Do what?" Junho sipped his coffee, a drink he had introduced to the station 6 months ago. Now 3 other species drank it regularly. "Connect everyone. The Vossen and Torvin still hate each other, but they both trade with you. The Kelvin won't speak to the Mrith, but you arrange their deals anyway. You're everywhere, and no one sees you as a threat." Junho shrugged. "I don't take sides. I don't care about your old wars or who insulted who 300 years ago. I just look for what people need and find ways to provide it." "It's not that simple," Ravik insisted. "Maybe not," Junho admitted. "But humans are good at seeing past the obvious. We look for the story behind the story. What someone says they want isn't always what they actually need." What Junho didn't mention was that he had 12 other humans working with him now, scattered across different sectors. They shared information, coordinated deals, filled gaps in trade networks that had existed for centuries. Individually, they were small traders. Together, they were becoming a central dot on Research Station Harmony. Dr. Summon's Xenocultural Institute had grown from a small lab to a sprawling complex. She now had researchers from 17 different species studying comparative culture and biology. But humans ran the administration, scheduled the meetings, mediated the disputes. "Why do humans manage everything?" asked Thel, a Vossen scientist. "No offense, but you're the newest species here." Soman looked up from her work. "Because we can talk to everyone. Vossen researchers won't cooperate with Torvin. Krell won't share lab space with Mrith, but everyone will work with humans. Why? Because we're neutral. We don't have ancient grudges. We don't have cultural taboos about who we can speak to. And we're genuinely curious about everyone." Soman gestured around the lab. "You're all fascinating to us. We want to learn from you, not compete with you." It was true. Humans approached alien cultures with enthusiasm rather than suspicion. They asked questions, learned languages, adapted to different social rules. Other species found it refreshing, if somewhat strange. Halfway across the galaxy, in a military planning room on the Vossen homeworld, a human sat reviewing defensive strategies. His name was Sejun, a former Earth military analyst who now worked as a private consultant. "Your formation is too rigid," Sejun said, pointing at the holographic display. "You optimize for maximum firepower, but you sacrifice flexibility." General Calther's scales rippled with annoyance. "That formation has won battles for 300 cycles. Against enemies who also use rigid formations," Sejun countered. "But what if they don't? What if they adapt mid-battle?" Calther considered this. The Vossen military prided itself on precision and overwhelming force. But the Viridian Belt incident had shown the limits of that approach. "What do you suggest?" "Smaller, independent units with authority to make tactical decisions. You'll sacrifice some coordination, but you'll gain the ability to respond to unexpected situations." Calther didn't like it. It went against everything the Vossen military had built. But he hired Sejun anyway, because deep down, he knew the human was right. What Calther didn't know was that Sejun was also consulting for the Torvin military, the Krell Defense Forces, and a small coalition of minor species. He was telling them all the same thing. Be flexible, adapt, think beyond your established patterns. And none of them knew he was working with their rivals. Siyu wasn't a spy. He wasn't trying to play sides against each other. He just genuinely believed that everyone would be safer if they learned to adapt. That this would reduce conflicts, not increase them. In the council headquarters on Calibris Prime, Adjudicator Vrelanek sat in her office reviewing reports. She was one of the council's senior investigators, responsible for monitoring emerging threats and unusual patterns. And she had noticed something strange. The reports were small, individually meaningless. A Meyer species handling complex trade negotiations. Human merchants establishing routes in contested territories without incident. Human researchers coordinating projects between rival species. Human consultants being hired by 4 separate militaries. Vrelanek pulled up humanity's file. Category 7, upgraded to Category 5 after the Viridian Belt incident. Population, 87 colonies across 9 sectors. No military fleet, no territorial disputes, no conflicts with other species. But everywhere she looked, humans were there. In the trade networks, the research stations, the military advisory boards, the cultural centers. They weren't conquering. They weren't threatening. They were just present, useful, connected. She ran an analysis of galactic trade routes over the past 5 years. The patterns made her pause. Human trading posts had become junction points. Routes that used to avoid certain regions now passed through human stations because the humans could negotiate with all sides. She checked research collaboration data. Human institutes were coordinating 70% of cross-species research projects. Not because they were the most advanced, but because they were the only ones everyone would work with. She reviewed military advisory contracts. Humans were consulting for 12 different species defense forces. 12. And somehow, none of those species seemed concerned that humans might be sharing their secrets. They trust them, Vrelanek muttered to herself. Why do they trust them? She decided to find out. She issued a formal request for Ambassador Hai-Jin to appear before a closed council session. Just a few senior members, nothing official. Just questions. Hai-Jin arrived 3 days later, calm and dignified as always. She sat in the center of a small chamber while 5 council members, including Vrelanek, watched her. Ambassador Hai-Jin, Vrelanek began. Humanity has become remarkably influential in a remarkably short time. We want to understand how. We work hard and try to be helpful, Hai-Jin replied simply. It's more than that, Vrelanek insisted. You're in trade networks, research institutes, military planning. You're everywhere. What is humanity's secret? Hai-Jin smiled slightly. We don't have a secret, Adjudicator. We just pay attention. We listen to what people need. We look for ways to help. We don't worry about old grudges or ancient protocols. We just try to solve problems. But why do other species trust you? Asked Kelthor, who was also present. Because we're not trying to dominate anyone, Hai-Jin said. We're new here. We don't have the power to threaten anyone, and we don't want it. We just want to be part of this galaxy. And the best way to do that is to be useful. The council members looked at each other. Finally, Vrelanek spoke again. Ambassador, I've been studying your species for weeks. I think I understand what makes you different. Most species in this galaxy are specialists. The Vossen are warriors. The Krell are builders. The Torvan are explorers. Everyone has optimized for one approach over millions of years. And humans? Hai-Jin asked. Are generalists. You're not the best at anything, but you're decent at everything. More importantly, you can shift between approaches. You think like traders when trading, like warriors when fighting, like researchers when studying. You adapt. Hai-Jin nodded slowly. That sounds right. It's your evolutionary history, Vrelinek continued. You were predators and prey. You had to think from multiple perspectives to survive. And now you're using that ability to integrate into a galaxy that doesn't know how to handle you. Are we a threat? Hyjin asked directly. Vrelinek considered this carefully. I don't know. You're not conquering anyone. But you're becoming essential. I'm not sure which is more dangerous. The council chamber was full for the first time in months. Every species had sent representatives. The topic being debated was simple but profound. What to do about humanity. Kelther stood at the central platform, his forearms gesturing as he spoke. The evidence is clear. In 7 years, humanity has integrated into our society at every level. They control significant portions of trade. They coordinate research across species barriers. They advise our militaries. This is unprecedented. They've done nothing wrong, countered a Torvan representative. They've helped us. They solved the Viridian Belt crisis when we could not. That's precisely the point, Kelther replied. They're becoming indispensable. What happens when we can't function without them? Adjudicator Vrelinek had spent 3 months investigating humanity. Now she presented her findings to the full council. Humanity doesn't operate like other species, she explained. They don't build empires through conquest or colonization. They build influence through connection. Look at this data. She displayed a network map of galactic trade. Human nodes glowed in blue, connecting dozens of other species in green. The map looked like a neural network with humans at the synapses. They're everywhere, Vrelinek continued. Not because they're powerful, but because they make themselves useful. They fill gaps we didn't know existed. They solve problems we couldn't solve. Should we restrict them? Someone asked, how? Vrelinek responded, they haven't violated any laws. They haven't claimed territory that isn't theirs. They haven't threatened anyone. What would we restrict? Their right to trade? To research? To help? The chamber fell silent. Outside the council headquarters, in a small cafe that hadn't existed a year ago, Junho served coffee to a mixed group of aliens. A Vossen, a Krell, and a Torvan sat at the same table, something that would have been unthinkable a decade ago. They were discussing a joint mining operation. This blend is excellent, the Vossen said, sipping carefully. It's from Earth, Junho replied. We grow it in the colonies now. The Krell looked around the cafe, noting the mix of species chatting peacefully. How did you do this, Junho? Make enemies into customers? Junho shrugged. I just provided good coffee and a comfortable space. The rest happened naturally. Turns out most people don't actually enjoy hating each other. They just need a reason to stop. It was a simple truth that the galaxy had forgotten somewhere along the way. Grudges persisted because breaking them was hard, required someone to take the first step. Humans took those steps without even realizing they were doing it. They had no history here, no ancient enemies, no pride to protect. They could be the bridge because they had nothing to prove. At Unity Station, Commander Deho, now Admiral Deho, received a formal communication. The council had voted. After days of debate, they had made a decision about humanity. He opened the message with Minji and Taiyang present. The same crew that had started this journey 7 years ago. They're upgrading us, Deho read. Category 1, full council membership. Minji's eyes widened. Category 1? That's the highest classification. That's for founding species, the most advanced civilizations. We're not the most advanced, Taiyang pointed out. No, Deho agreed. But we're the most integrated. The message continued with details about voting rights, territory claims, military obligations. Humanity was now officially a major power in the Galactic Council. Not through conquest. Not through technology. Through connection. On Calibers Prime, Ambassador Haijing received the news in her office. She sat quietly for a moment, thinking about the journey. 7 years ago, they had been dismissed as insignificant. Now they had a seat at the table, equal to species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. She thought about what Vrelanak had said, that humans were dangerous not because they were threatening, but because they were becoming essential. It was true. The galaxy had grown to depend on human traders, human researchers, human consultants. Not because humans forced them to, but because humans made things easier. The official council session began the next day. Haijin walked to the central floor for the first time, not as an observer in a distant booth, but as a full member. The chamber fell silent as she took her position. The speaker, the ancient crystal jellyfish, spoke formally. The Galactic Council recognizes humanity as a Category 1 civilization with full membership rights and responsibilities. Ambassador Haijin, do you accept on behalf of your species? We accept, Haijin said clearly. And we thank the Council for this opportunity. Do you have any statement for the Council? The speaker asked. Haijin looked around the chamber at the 47 different species. Some who had welcomed humanity, some who had dismissed them, some who still seemed uncertain about what humans actually were. 7 years ago, we wandered into this galaxy by accident, Haijin began. We were primitive, insignificant, beneath notice. You gave us a small sector and forgot about us. And that was fine. We didn't need grand recognition. We just needed a chance. She paused, making sure everyone was listening. You were looking for what makes us dangerous, what secret weapon or hidden strength we possessed. You won't find it because it doesn't exist. We're not a threat because we're strong. We're influential because we're adaptable. We became essential by being useful, not powerful. Some of you are worried about what happens now. What do the humans want? What's our agenda? The truth is simple. We want to be part of this galaxy. We want to trade, to learn, to grow, to contribute. We want what everyone wants, a place to belong. We didn't conquer your trade routes. We filled the gaps and made them better. We didn't dominate your research. We helped you collaborate. We didn't threaten your militaries. We showed you new perspectives. We did all of this not because we're superior, but because we're different. And sometimes, different is exactly what's needed. The chamber remained silent. Then, slowly, the Torvan representative began to make a gesture of approval, a rippling of feathers. Others joined. Not everyone, but enough. After the session, Haijin walked through Calibers Prime's commercial district. The station had changed in 7 years. There were more human businesses now, small shops and cafes scattered among the alien establishments. She passed one, a tiny restaurant called G1's Kitchen. Inside, she could see species from a dozen different worlds eating together. At one table, a Vossen and a Krull shared a meal, their translator devices allowing conversation. The owner, a young human woman named G1, moved between tables with practiced ease, understanding each species' dietary needs, their cultural taboos, their preferences. Haijin watched through the window. This was humanity's real power. Not weapons or technology or grand strategy. Just the simple ability to understand, to connect, to make people feel welcome. The galaxy had noticed humanity's arrival 7 years ago. They had cataloged humans, studied them, debated them. But they had completely missed the actual invasion. It hadn't been ships or soldiers or weapons. It had been coffee shops and trading posts and research labs. It had been friendly conversations and solved problems and bridges built between ancient enemies. It had been 1,000 small actions by thousands of humans who just wanted to help. To be useful, to belong. By the time the Council realized what was happening, humanity had already woven itself into the fabric of galactic society. They weren't conquerors standing outside the walls. They were already inside, part of the structure itself, essential and irreplaceable. Hygiene smiled and walked on. They had wandered into the galaxy as insignificant primitives. They were leaving as something far more dangerous and far more valuable. They were leaving as necessary. The galaxy would never be the same. And humanity was just getting started.